It was Pakistan who was one of the first nations to recognize China. If China is what it is today, an economic and a superpower, okay, a large gratitude it owes to Pakistan. $1 billion, $10 billion, or $62 billion is irrelevant for China. They'll buy it out. Whether it's a loan or not a loan, also it doesn't matter. Whether Pakistan repays or not, also it doesn't matter. Pakistan's history is it's never repaid a loan. I don't think Taliban is such a strong organization at the grassroots level that it can control these Islamic sentiments. And if these Islamic sentiments go towards the north, China is in trouble. If Durand Line goes into problem, CPEC is threatened. Pakistan will be unstable. An unstable Pakistan is unstable CPEC. Everyone very glibly talks collusivity. India is strong. We can do a hell of a lot to sort out collusivity.
Higher than the Himalayas, deeper than the ocean, sweeter than honey and stronger than steel. Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. I'm sure a lot of us have heard these lines before. These lines connote the Pakistan-China friendship, or as I'd like to call it, the Pakistan-China nexus. The unusual friendship between these two have perplexed many analysts. How do two opposing streams of thought and two opposing societies come together and even think about forming a nexus? We need to understand this if we want to deal with them. And to help us understand this, I have with me Lieutenant General Ravi Shankar, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, a retired Director General from the Artillery Corps of the Indian Army. He is today a strategic thinker, a writer, and a speaker. I'm sure a lot who are regular to this channel have seen him speak multiple times on various different issues. I'm grateful, sir, once again for joining me.
Thanks, Adi. Thanks for calling me over to your show once again. It's always an interesting topic, China and Pakistan. Iron brothers, one a Islamist and one a atheist, one a communist and one a supposedly military democracy. Oh, how they have got on is a very interesting path.
I must say the word military democracy is very interesting. So I'm going to note that down somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
So to start with,
military-run democracy, if I may put it. Military-run democracy. Yeah.
So to start with, where did this whole thing start? How did Pakistan and China come together? Where did the story even begin?
See, the story begins actually at the turn of the independence. India and Pakistan got independence in 47. China got independence, or rather the People's Republic of China came into being in 49, right? And at that time, very strangely, the Pakistanis were more British-oriented and more Western-oriented than India itself. However, very strangely, it was Pakistan who was one of the first nations to recognize China. And they were always a needle between China and the British, and the legacy of India, the British India and China, there would be a needle. It was always on the cards. However, Pakistan felt that they should make use of this needle, or rather they foresaw this and recognized China with the principle, the enemy of your enemy is your friend. And that is the fundamental principle of the China-Pakistan friendship or relationship.
That's interesting. So anti-India sentiments have got them together.
Yeah, that was the fundamental driver of this whole story.
Interesting.
Right? Even at that point of time, despite the fact that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru tried his best to make friendship with China and come to an understanding with them, he couldn't, because that was almost preordained. And Pakistan sensed this and took the lead with China.
So since you mentioned Prime Minister Nehru, I'm going to just jump on to the 1962 war, 65 and 71. These are the major battles fought between India, Pakistan, India, China. We never saw the other coming to one's aid or help, or probably a diversion even during these wars. Why is that, sir?
See, 62 when it happened, China didn't need any help. I mean, the whole story is very clear. That was a time when the Indian establishment defeated itself rather than the Chinese. See. At that time, the Pakistanis were very happy that whatever was happening to India happened. And remember, at that point of time, East Pakistan and West Pakistan were two different entities, and Pakistan was a different configuration in 62. Okay. Now, come 65. One of the main reasons why 65 happened, and Pakistanis took the lead, or rather the aggression of 65, was they knew that India was weak as a result of what China did. And they also expected that China will assist, handling in the war, 65 war. It didn't happen. It didn't happen for one good reason. China itself was weak. China was going through that cultural revolution. Remember, at the time of the 56 to 62, around that time was a time of great turmoil in China, great famines in China. It was a man-made China famine. 30 to 40 million people were dying. Despite that, they undertook the 62 war. The aftermath continued for a long time. So China was in actually no position to help Pakistan, right? And so Pakistan had to play a lone hand, and it bought uh, grief, right? Come 71, China did mention at one point of time that they would help Pakistan out. In fact, it was said, the yellow help from China and the blue help from USA. The blue line and the yellow line from the helplines from both these China and USA will see Pakistan through in their war in 71. But what had happened by then was there was a lot of the international sentiment was wildly against Pakistan. One. Number two, USA was heavily in favor of Pakistan. As a result, China backed off. And that's my surmise. It's not written anywhere, but that's my surmise. And then we had taken some steps to ensure that China doesn't come through from the north when we went into Bangladesh. And of course, by then China had not fully recovered. Mao was in his last stages. After all, if you remember, 72 was the time when Mao and Nixon met, and soon after that, Mao passed away. Mao, I wouldn't say his grip was loose, but his focus, I think, had shifted. And that is why in 71, China didn't come to Pakistan's aid. But there was no dichotomy in the fact that Pakistan was being supported by China. Right? On that, there's no issue. Okay. So that is that. The next real uh, time when, the nexus started and the collusiveness started was in 74. 74, if you remember, Pokhran happened and we went in for that nuclear blast. The moment we went in for that nuclear blast, and Pakistan said we must have the bomb. It doesn't matter if we have to eat grass for 100 years. That's what Bhutto said. Right? Right? We'll eat grass for 100 years, but we'll have the bomb. So that's why they went to China. As much as AQ Khan and his network filched secrets out of the West, right, Europe mainly, they also got a lot of help from China. And China was a known proliferator at that time. And China, even at that stage, was proliferating to North Korea and Pakistan. In fact, the complete missile program is either through China or through North Korea. So these three were almost termed as the rogue states in those times in terms of proliferation. So you see that whole thing at that point of time, around 74, when that collusion was there very strong. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm sure they both would have got a bit taken aback
Yeah.
by that and pushed into a corner with each other. So there's also the question of the Shaksgam Valley, which is, bothered a lot of people. Could you explain that?
See, yeah, see the Shaksgam Valley side of the Kunjarab Pass, right? Holding on to it was difficult for Pakistan. It's a small sliver on the other side. Whereas for China, it made a lot of sense. So when they wanted to be good with each other and they saw a lot of cooperation and they saw a common foe in India, so Pakistan ceded the territory to China and free of cost without any this thing and settled its border there on the Kunjrab Pass. That's the story of the Shaksgam Valley. Shaksgam Valley is really the approach to the Kunjrab Pass, right? It is parallel to the Karakoram, and that's how it is. And this is what makes their relationship strong. They gave away territory, they got missile technology, they got nuclear technology, they got international support. Every at every point of time, China has supported Pakistan in the UN. So they've developed a cozy relationship over time. And mind you, this is despite the fact that Pakistan was not part of the communist camp. In fact, we were more oriented towards the Russians and the communists. They were more socialistic in outlook. Pakistan was part of the Baghdad Pact. It was part of CENTO. It was American acolyte. It was known then itself. Right? America supported it fully. Despite that, it had a great equation with China. And this was despite, again, China and USA never had a great equation. After all, you must remember 50s, late 50s, the Korean War was between China and USA, where the whole thing swung back between South Korea to North Korea to Yalu, and finally it settled at the 30th parallel, right? So you're talking of that point of time when America and USA, America and China were not friends. Pakistan and USA were great friends. Despite that, Pakistan and China, the relationship flawed. So there are a lot of hues to this story. Yeah.
Interesting, sir. You also mentioned in one of the answers that there is a effort that was made by the Pakistanis to bring the United States and the Chinese together. And you also mentioned in the last answer that they were diametrically opposite. How did that happen?
Yeah. See, you have to understand uh, when Nixon and Kissinger, this duo, were in office, they wanted to shape the world. Part of shaping of the world was to destroy Russia. Okay, you destroy USSR, then USSR, which was the sole competitor to USA. But where do you get markets? What do you do with the economy? It needed markets. You needed, at that point itself, they said, look, we need to have someone who's our backyard, who will do everything for us, who will be our, manufacturer, who will open markets for us. So they said, okay, we will destroy USSR and develop China. That was the philosophy of Kissinger. Basically, it was Kissinger's. It was right. In fact, I will put it as the Kissinger plan, and Nixon accepted it. Now, how do you reach out to Mao? Mao was still the strongman of China, and whatever he said went. So they didn't have a conduit, right? The conduits they had were either through one of the East European countries, right, or through Pakistan.
Mm.
Okay, so they chose Pakistan because Pakistan had great equation with China, and USA and Pakistan were on the same page. So soon after Pakistan was divided and Bangladesh was born, this is in 72. So this was put forth to Pakistan that you facilitate. Pakistan midwife the relationship, I put it always. So what happened? One day, Kissinger came to Pakistan. He came to Pakistan to visit Pakistan and carry out some talks and all that. He feigned sickness. And that night he caught a military plane from Pakistan, hopped across to China, met Mao, made the groundwork for rapprochement between USA and China, came back to Pakistan the next day, and appeared as if he's now become okay and flew back to USA. And then a couple of months later, I don't remember the dates exactly, that was when Nixon landed up in USA, and then the famous handshake between Nixon and Mao,
Oh, yeah.
and then that was the beginning of the takeoff of the Chinese economy. But then the Chinese economy didn't take off then. Mao died. Then Mao's wife, with a gang of four, wanted to rule. Then there was a period of internal struggle in China. Deng Xiaoping came up. Once Deng Xiaoping came up, he realized the value of carrying on with USA and progress China accordingly. In all this while, they were beholden to Pakistan. What many people don't understand, if China is what it is today, an economic and a superpower, okay, a large uh, gratitude it owes to Pakistan.
Hmm.
That is something which China has not forgotten, and that to me has always been a basis of a relationship between the two.
Matter of honor, I guess.
Yeah, it's a matter of honor, and of course, the governments also gelled. You had a total out and out autocracy, authoritarian communist regime in uh, China, where only one man's voice said everything. The same was in Pakistan, whether it was Bhutto or it was later Ziaul Haq, right? Or, or anyone, or Musharraf, or whoever came by later. It was a one-man show in Pakistan also. The military democracy of Pakistan, right? One-man voice. So it was a connect between the two, without any both authoritarian regimes, dictatorships of some kind. So they could converse easily and come to a very common understanding very fast, right?
Hmm.
And that was above everything else,
Was that
right?
the reason that the Chinese gave them the nuclear weapons? Part of it
Well,
also
that's
including India?
part of the whole thing. Part of the whole thing, you see. And then, of course, both of them had this common enemy in India.
Yeah, of course.
After 62, they were common enemies, right? And China kept supporting Pakistan in UN and every other
Hmm.
international forum.
Hmm.
Okay, right? So that was how it was. That's the basis of this nexus. And as China rose, uh, and you have to also realize that around the turn of the century, China and India were sort of competitors. 90s, we had our reforms and we started rising. China by then had started rising. It was everyone used to compare India and China for everything, right? And China was very clear that India will be its main competitor. You look back, George Fernandez had said that China is our number one enemy long at that point of time itself. Very visionary in his thinking, right? And China had to do whatever it had to put us down. Pakistan, of course, needed just a needle to take off after us. And after all, by then they had stoked insurgency in
Hmm.
J&K and
Yeah.
Punjab and all that. So it was a nexus of, then the nexus became hardened.
Interesting, sir. So you mentioned the turn of the century. This is the time where the whole this whole dialogue that I mentioned about higher than the Himalayas and all that stuff came out with the advent of the CPEC, or the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Deals were signed, big promises were made. That all apart, sir. What my question is, what is the CPEC to Pakistan and what is the CPEC to China?
See, the CPC is a later day phenomenon. After all, that was This entire story of CPEC and it came as OBOR, One Belt, One Road. All this came when Xi Jinping came to power, right? Before that, in the decade 2000 to 2010, roughly 2012, the whole thing was just cementing the equation: missile proliferation, nuclear proliferation. Complete the technology for the nuclear power plants of Pakistan and the raw material used to come from China. Once AQ Khan got exposed, right, everything was there. And of course, they would oppose India in every forum together. But when you look at the One Belt, One Road and saying, what is it? Now, by the time Xi Jinping became the numero uno in China, it was very clear that China was aspiring for superpower status. And this fellow was, he was fast forwarding it in a great manner. So he wanted to set out this One Belt, One Road, or BRI as it is now called, and the CPEC. The BRI was to be the strategic platform by which through trade, he would control a lot of things. Through the money surplus which he had, he would control a lot of things. It has only a geostrategic value. The trade part of it was very less. There no doubt. But CPEC you have to understand in a different manner. At that time, if you remember, around 2000 to 2010, Pakistan's economy was not great, though it was reviving in post 9/11 attacks. It wasn't great. It needed infusion, and once America started losing interest in Pakistan because of the Iraq War and all that, Pakistan knew at one point of time there'll be a fracture with America. Once America leaves Afghanistan, it was not. It was always on the cards. And then what does Pakistan do for money? So it had to do something. Their population is going up. Everything is going up. No money, no productivity. Economy is going down, right? On the other side, you have India, which is rising. Its economy is booming, right? So they said, we have to upgrade our economy. Let's do it through China. So China, we take loans from China and build the CPEC. The power situation used to be very bad in Pakistan.
Correct.
So that is another thing. Upgrade of roads, dams. Water is a major problem in Pakistan. So let's take the dam technology also from China. These are the things which drove Pakistan to accept CPEC. For China, CPEC meant something different. China, to become a superpower, had to have access to two oceans. It had access to the Pacific, the West Pacific, but nothing else. And China's geography is constrictive on the West Pacific. There's no open access to the ocean, right? And China was dependent on the Middle East for energy, and that energy had to flow through Malacca. So it had to outflank the Malacca. It had to have access to a second ocean, right? In fact, Robert Kaplan has written a beautiful article on two ocean strategy.
Yeah.
China has been striving to get into the Indian Ocean somehow, either through Myanmar or Pakistan, or through the Kara Canal across Malaysia. These three are the only ways you can outflank or get out of the Malacca dilemma. In this, Pakistan was the best bet. So they chose Gwadar. Gwadar, which is at the head of the Gulf, right? Now, if you have Gwadar, you can control the Gulf.
Correct.
Right? You can control your own energy lines through the Gulf. And then you have Gwadar, which is secure in Pakistan. You have a base. So you reach Indian Ocean. Okay. And with that, you connect up to Xinjiang. So you have an overload land route to Xinjiang. Gwadar on its own won't survive because Pakistan was always shaky. Everyone knew that. So to bail Gwadar out, or rather to anchor Gwadar, You need a connectivity behind into your mainland. That is why they developed all these roads into Xinjiang, so that they have some connectivity, some escape route. Tomorrow something happens to Gwadar, and we are talking about 8-9 years back when things were not that close. Even now, it's not so clean. They don't have a clean run into Gwadar,
Yeah.
right? So Gwadar had to be anchored, and that anchor was Pakistan. So that is how CPC makes sense. Whether it's $1 billion, $10 billion, or $62 billion is irrelevant for China. They'll buy it out. Whether it's a loan or not a loan, also it doesn't matter. Whether Pakistan repays or not, also it doesn't matter.
Doesn't.
They get the second ocean avenue through Pakistan, CPEC, right? And Pakistan's history is it's never repaid a loan. It always takes loan and never repays it. Everyone knows Pakistan is a beggared state. Okay, it's always been bankrupt. So it's not as if the Chinese have gone there hoping that they'll get money back. No, that's out of question, right? But the strategic value of the CPEC is more important to understand.
I
For
think
Pakistan, it
sorry.
was development, sorely needed development. Someone is investing. So there's political value in it and everything in it. So it is a thing of mutual convenience. And then Pakistan survives because the new superpower, if it enables China to become a superpower, it gets its own power. And it felt that America was declining, so it switched to China. So that's the logic behind CPEC.
Interesting. I think that is a very interesting thing that people fail to, I think, understand that. And you brought it out pretty well, sir. That to China, it is probably pocket change in terms of the
Yeah.
investment. For Pakistan, it may be a huge amount of money, and they can do bangla on the streets. That's fine. But for the Chinese, I think the whole perspective is very, very different, and that's a very interesting and a very important thing for us to remember. But sir, having said all that, the Chinese have their own interest in Afghanistan, be that as may. The two ocean theories and all that probably surrounding India and all other game of that sort. Why does China help Pakistan out in international forums? And it's not just against India; it helps them out in various other different things as well. What's the
See,
reason?
there are two issues. One, if you want to become a two ocean champion, you need Pakistan. Pakistan is the best bet, right? So Pakistan has to be helped. That's the first thing. Second, anti-India. You have a common foe in India, okay, and hence helping Pakistan is important. And then there's a third, loyalty factor. China wouldn't be the economic superpower it is today, but for the fact that Pakistan helped. To that extent, I give credit to China for not having, dumped Pakistan. And then, Pakistan is one Islamic state which has some say in the Islamic world. Whether we like it or not, it has some say. So, China keeping Pakistan is important on its side. And then, of course, the Xinjiang factor. Pakistan helps them in controlling that ETIM.
Correct.
Okay. So, and the East Turkestan, though there are others, but Pakistan is the most important player, important Muslim country which is next to Xinjiang, which can affect it. Now, of course, Afghanistan is coming in a different form, but that's a different story.
Absolutely. Sir, you mentioned Afghanistan. I'm going to hop on to that. Do you think the Chinese are, they're doing their own negotiations with the Taliban? We just saw photographs of the whole delegation flying into China, talking to Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China. Do you think the Chinese would take the Pakistani route into Afghanistan, or probably, deal with it themselves?
They'll do both. And Pakistan also will do both. Look, there's a very clear understanding now that is emerging that Pakistan and China are on one page as far as dealing with Afghanistan is concerned. We have to remember Taliban is a creation of Pakistan.
Correct.
I'm not saying this. Pakistanis are saying this.
Hmm.
Parvez Hoodboy, who's a renowned physicist and a respected man within Pakistan, has written an article on this 3 days back in Dawn, where he said Mirza Alam Beg, General Mirza Alam Beg, is the one who created Taliban.
Correct.
So Pakistan will always back Taliban. As far as Taliban is in power in Afghanistan, Pakistan is very happy, right? And if Taliban can be controlled through Pakistan in some measure, or rather negotiations it can facilitate, why will China go and negotiate directly? They'll negotiate through Pakistan, isn't it? Pakistan is sending LAT guys, this, that, everyone there. So it's a matter of mutual convenience. And of course, when it comes to putting money on table, China will do it with Taliban direct.
Of course. Hmm.
And China will also has also put money on the table with the Afghan government. So they'll do both. So and they've also issued the thing that we'll do everything together as a joint force to stabilize Afghanistan. They've said it. The foreign ministers of Pakistan and China have said it. So they will go together on this issue.
No matter what the basic differences here and there, which
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah. They have not. Look, Pakistan and China have no differences on how to handle Afghanistan.
Hmm.
Okay, they are hedging their bets. What if Taliban doesn't take over Afghanistan? Then they have to have a different strategy, right? Pakistan knows whether Taliban is there or not. They're going to have a tough time on the Durand line. The dangers are there. Those, that as a bombing attempt on the Chinese ambassador,
Hmm.
those, that IED attack on those 9 engineers, and the other day in Karachi, there were 2 Chinese who were shot. Now, all these, if you connect the dots, there is an anti-China sentiment in Pakistan. And that anti-China sentiment, to my way of looking at it, lies along the Durand line. So there is a problem in Pakistan which is happening. PTM, Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, has already started taking out demonstrations to
Yeah.
say that why are we interfering in Afghanistan? So that entire area is going to become restive. So both China and Pakistan have to face the music together, and they're looking for the pudding also together. And then China has this problem with ETIM. Okay? And ETIM or the Uyghurs also form part of Taliban.
Right.
Okay. Then Taliban has links with Al Qaeda, it has got links with IS, Uyghurs, Chechens, Uzbeks. Taliban will say something to Pakistan and China, but might do something else totally different. So far, Taliban has not said anything and or kept up to it.
Correct. Absolutely.
Whatever it has promised, it has reneged. Right? So, and I don't think Taliban is such a strong organization at the grassroots level that it can control these Islamic sentiments. And if these Islamic sentiments go towards the north, China is in trouble.
Correct. I think. I think this is a thought that came in my mind as well. The Pakistanis and the Chinese are kind of putting their hands on Taliban just to make sure that their own internal security is not kind of this thing.
Yes.
It's going to be more or less.
It's both
tested.
ways.
Yeah.
They're looking at first and foremost, it's their internal security.
Then
See, you have to look at it another way. If Xinjiang goes into problems,
Yeah.
and as it is, they're facing sanctions there, right? And Xinjiang, right? Durand Line goes into problem. CPEC is threatened. Okay, if Durand Line goes into problem, CPEC is threatened. Pakistan will be unstable. An unstable Pakistan is unstable CPEC. Unstable Xinjiang. Then Secretary Blinken came the other day to India, and he started a dialogue with Tibetans. The US people have already a special coordinator for Tibet. They've appointed. He's like a special envoy for Tibet to look into Tibetan affairs. Now, if Tibet and Xinjiang go even a little unstable, one China is at risk. The core interests of CCP is at risk.
Half the
Why do you
country.
think? Why do you think Xi Jinping ran to
Tibet.
Lhasa and Ningxi? He didn't go to admire Potala Palace. He's gone there to know what the hell is happening. And he's got into we had a problem in Eastern Ladakh.
Yeah.
There's a life situation there going on. A lot of issues there. I mean, this cauldron is quite tight
Correct.
and on the boil. Yeah.
That's interesting to realize, sir. So, last question. Let's future gaze a bit. How do you see this nexus going forward, especially in the newest kind of warfare that we see is the gray zone or the hybrid kind of operations?
Well, first and foremost, you have to understand this will prosper. This nexus is there to stay. Both are adept at gray zone or hybrid operations. Pakistan is a master of it, and so is China. The communist ideology is actually undermining people. Communist ideology anywhere undermines others.
Yeah.
And that's how they've been doing, whether it's in Hong Kong, whether it's they're trying in Taiwan, or whether they're trying in the South China Sea. They give confidence to others and pull the rug from underneath. And that's what both of them have been doing. It's a common trait, right? Both of them support each other in influence operations. Both of them support each other in public relations. Both of them support each other in, propaganda, right? And let's be very clear on one thing: China will keep supporting Pakistan financially. It will keep supporting Pakistan militarily. Money doesn't count. They need each other. Without Pakistan, China will not become a superpower. Without China, Pakistan might not survive. Because where does Pakistan get money from? Earlier it was USA, right? Now it is this. There's another problem which China has with Afghanistan: narcotics,
Yeah, of course.
which we have discussed earlier also. So if narcotic trade starts going north, where does China go? So there are major issues in this, and I don't see this nexus breaking.
The Opium Wars Part 2, I guess.
I suppose so.
So, what about conventional operations, conventional military operations? You mentioned that they didn't come into each other's support for their own purposes at the times that they were fighting with India. What about the future?
See, there are many equations. For them to come to support with each other, the military temperatures have to be very high. There has to be all-out war. We are now looking at 3 nuclear nations.
Correct.
The chances of a configuration which goes up to nuclear level is very dicey. And any configuration has to be well below the nuclear threshold. Well below. Kargil, I was on a previous generation. It gives the space. I think Kargil was the upper limit of the nuclear threshold.
Correct.
Galwan is the lower limit of the nuclear threshold in conflict in the Sino-Pak Indian triangle. Conflict has to be between this, more towards the lower end.
Localized.
If they collude and come up, what stops India from using its nuclear card? So I don't see this conflict in a military conflict scenario, each reinforcing other without thinking through this. If they collude and India plays the nuclear card, everyone is in a problem.
Big, yeah.
Right? And if it's a small level, low level operation, which say China feels it can control or Pakistan feels it can control, they'll do it. They will threaten collusivity, but might not even get there.
So that brings about a threat to themselves and their own survivability.
Yeah, it's, I won't say survivability and all. See, that's a nuclear dimension. That's a different ball game. They won't like to come there, right?
Interesting.
So I don't visualize collusion happening. Yeah, collusion and everything else will happen.
Gray zone. Yeah.
Gray zone, their info ops, influence ops, support, economy, energy, all these domains it can happen. Military funding, logistics, everything else. But actual fighting, they'll be very conscious of the red lines which they have to breach.
Interesting. I think this has been a
Their red lines is the nuclear red lines.
Yeah.
Okay. There's another action to this. There's another thing. Just think. We put two divisions. We pushed up into JNK. Eastern Ladakh. They're there rebalancing a core. That they're there, isn't it? Suppose China does something. Pakistan also does something. India is able to hold, make amends with one, right? Make amends with one and sorts out the other. What happens?
embarrassing.
As much as the collusivity is from both sides, you are the center. You can hit either side. And who knows how military issues go on, how geopolitics go on.
Of course.
What if China is stuck in the South China Sea and you go and sort out Pakistan and China can do nothing about it? If there's a collusivity and it happens, and you bide your time, you defend yourself, you bide your time, and given the opportunity, you sort out the other guy, it's there on the cards. Or for that matter, you block Pakistan at that point of time, and China is busy anywhere and sort out China also.
Anything.
Anything. See, now we are going into the realm of the unknown.
Absolutely.
So collusivity has got, everyone very glibly talks collusivity. India is strong. We can do a hell of a lot to sort out collusivity. And also don't forget, Quad is there. Malacca Straits is still there. The Malacca dilemma of China has not gone away.
Yes.
Okay. So, we should be very careful when we talk what collusivity will come.
Interesting, because the narrative which is set in most of this thing is, oh, Chinese are using the Skadu airfield, they've had military exercises and so on and so forth, which brings about a very, very interesting picture saying that, okay, these two guys are getting ready for action against India. But when you actually break it down, as you've just done, you realize that it's going to cause more damage than profit to either one of them. So you might not be able to control events. Yeah.
So I don't think anyone will. In any case, under the present conditions, I don't think they can think of all this nonsense.
Absolutely.
They have Afghanistan. They should take care of that, and of course there are other issues. But right, and let me tell you, China itself is not in a great shape today.
Yeah.
And I'm writing an article on it. Maybe in a couple of days, I'll be publishing it also.
Yeah, we need to talk about that, sir.
Yeah, we will.
The second part of who's China's biggest enemy.
Yes, we will.
Sir, I think you brought out the history of Pakistan, China's, common foe factor and how they actually got together. And it's probably the last man and the last woman on the planet Earth. And they said, well, you know what, there's nothing much we can do. So they got together because at the end of it, if you look at it, their motives of being together is very, very simple and precise. And the reason that they were able to get together is because of an authoritarian regime in both the places. And that's something that you brought out very, very nicely. China owes a lot to the Pakistanis, and that's something which is not said by a lot of the analysts that look at this particular friendship. It's a matter of honor. The Oriental people, I'm not saying it with any, delegation.
I
but
agree with you.
they consider honor as a big thing. So I guess that's what is keeping them still there.
Yes,
And
I agree with you.
yeah, so that's very interesting to know, sir. But of course, the Pakistanis and the Chinese are looking at Afghanistan. They've got their own toy to play right now, and I think their attention is far away from India as a collusive force or anything of that sort. But so, it is going to be very interesting to see how the Chinese are going to carry the Pakistanis forward because they're converting it into another North Korea. And we've discussed this. They've got a proxy on each side of their border, one on the east, one on the west, to probably take care of their the stuff that they don't want to get into, or they don't want to touch, or they find it below their level to even involve themselves. So,
To
thank you
catch
so much.
force.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting all this thing together to bring about a very different reality of the Pakistanis and the Chinese. Although they are very close friends, but at the end of it, I don't think the Chinese would actually, by what I learn, is the Chinese would actually consider them as equals. They would be considered as something that the Chinese need for their own growth and development. And thank you for
Yes.
bringing that out very, very nicely, sir.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Abhi.
Thank you, sir. Until next time, as we discussed, who's the biggest enemy of China? Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.